What criminal committed an almost perfect crime? And what was the thing that messed it up? The Dunbar Armored Robbery, the largest cash heist in US history. A 6-man inside job to rob an armored cash depot. They set up a house party as an alibi, used the keys to get into the cafeteria, and waited in there until all the employees came in on break, then ambushed and subdued them without firing a shot or raising an alarm. They then loaded the money bags, with over $18 million, into an U-Haul, destroyed the CCTV tapes, and returned to the party. Then they sat on the money for 6 months before hiring a crooked lawyer to set up a real estate money laundering scheme to avoid suspicion. 2 years after the robbery, one of the men paid a real estate broker with a stack of money still wrapped in the original currency strap. The broker immediately reported it to the police. After being arrested, he cracked under interrogation, confessed to the robbery, and ratted out his partners. Edit. All the men have since finished their prison sentences, and most of the money was never found. So there's a chance they still won in the end. Story 2. John George Hay killed up to 6 people between 1944 and 1949 by either clubbing or shooting his victims, and then disposed of their bodies by dissolving them in concentrated sulfuric acid. He would then fraudulently sell their assets, properties, etc., and pocket the cash. His workshop contained no drainage, so he simply poured the remains on a pile of rubble. His last victim, an elderly victim, disappeared, and 2 days later, he accompanied the victim's friend to the police station, where police discovered his history of fraud. At his workshop, the police found papers concerning his earlier victims, and dry cleaning, jewelry tickets for his last victim. A pathologist examining the human remains found parts of a pelvis, gallstones and dentures on the rubble. Hay then claimed he had killed his last victim, destroying the body in acid, and completely misunderstanding the legal term of corpus delicti, claimed that he could not be charged as there was nobody to determine a crime had taken place. The man went to the gallows. Edit. Hay came from a particularly devout Plymouth Brethren background, and frequently had vampire dreams of being offered blood to drink. In his police interview, he tried to plead insanity, in the hope that he would be sent to Broadmoor, asylum prison, but of course that fell through. A draft dodger, Hay spent much of WW2 in prison for crimes related to fraud and embezzlement. In jail, he experimented dissolving dead mice in sulfuric acid stolen from the prison workshop. People he killed: the McSwan family. The senior McSwan was his employer. He murdered the son, then claimed that he had fled to Scotland to escape being called up for the army. As the war was coming to an end, the McSwans wondered why their son wasn't coming home. So in luring Mr. McSwan into his basement flat workshop, bludgeoned him to death, then sat him up in a chair before luring Mrs. McSwan and doing likewise. The Henderson couple. Mr. Henderson, a formed army medic and private doctor. Hay befriended this couple who had just moved into the area. At a housewarming party in which Hay played piano, he stole Henderson's service revolver, which he used to shoot the Hendersons with some time later. After murdering the Hendersons, he stopped at a cafe and had a brunch of poached eggs on toast and tea before finishing off the job. Mrs. Durand Deacon, a wealthy long-time resident widow that resided in the Onslow Court Hotel in Kensington, London, where Hay also resided. In all of these murders, he would strip the bodies and possessions of jewels, fur coats, etc., and take life insurance and conveyancing papers with him, which he would cash in on. He also claimed to have drank a pint of blood from his victims, but that is likely his insanity plea. Story 3. The Antwerp Diamond Heist, the perfect heist of the century, where an Italian gang stole 100 million in gems. While leaving Antwerp, they disposed of the disguises and the tools used, but one member of the gang was too lazy to burn everything as instructed. Among the rubbish, the police found envelopes of the Antwerp Diamond Center and a receipt for a sandwich bought at a store close to the center. They recovered video footage of the sandwich store and busted the mastermind of the heist, who didn't give up his mates, but some were later identified. Some of the stolen diamonds are still unaccounted for. Story 4. I knew a guy who got into selling drugs on the dark web. He had this setup where he'd buy the drugs and package them in his room, ship them through USPS, and collect money through cryptocurrency. He made a lot of money, went on for a while without being caught. They even found fictionalized accounts he wrote about how he was able to do this, including driving 50 miles to make drops. He was caught when an employee noticed he was handling large numbers of small envelopes while wearing latex gloves and reported it. He probably would have gotten away with it if he'd worn winter gloves over the latex. Story 5. There's the story of Daniel Rigmaiden. He was a scam artist who defrauded the government out of hundreds of thousands in tax money. He was eventually caught, but was so confident that his methods of avoiding capture were thorough that he thought law enforcement had to have been cheating in some way, abusing power. When caught, he turned whistleblower. This kid was smart. Per documentary IMDb, he evades the FBI for months. Once captured, he uses his time, then in prison, to investigate. His obsessive search for the truth leads to a groundbreaking discovery. Law enforcement used a secret technology called a stingray to intercept his phone calls and personal information, as well as those of millions of unsuspecting Americans. He takes his discovery public, and the revelation not only carries implications for his case, but also for the fate of the Fourth Amendment. The stingrays are cell site simulators, or EMSI catchers, invasive cell phone surveillance devices that mimic cell phone towers and send out signals to trick cell phones in the area into transmitting their locations and identifying information. When used to track a suspect's cell phone, they also gather information about the phones of countless bystanders who happen to be nearby, as a law enforcement can literally drive down any block with one turned on, having it connect to every single mobile device as it moves down the street. Mobile cell towers, essentially gathering your information without your knowledge. Story 6. In 1995, Mark Winger of Springfield, Illinois wanted to kill his wife Donna, if I remember correctly, so he could carry on an affair, and the perfect scenario came. A week before her death, Roger Harrington was her shuttle driver on the way home from the St. Louis airport, and he reportedly spoke about always getting high and having orgies. In turn, the Wingers complained to the shuttle company. Then, Mark calls the police, claiming that he shot Roger after he caught him attacking Donna. Despite the contradiction of Roger being shot in a way that Mark did not claim happened, the case was shut and Mark was viewed as a hero for killing the man who killed his wife. However, in his infinite wisdom, Mark wouldn't stop asking the police about the case, despite it being ruled as closed. Also, he tried to sue the shuttle company for Roger's alleged action, to which the company started their own investigation, which strongly suggested that the events couldn't have gone the way Mark described. The final nail came when his affair partner came forward to the police and described their affair, which led to further re-examination of evidence that showed it was staged. Mark was later tried and convicted in 2002 and sentenced to life without parole. In another deep moment from Mark, he was later given an extra 35 years for trying to solicit the murder of his affair partner and his rich friend, who refused to bail him out from behind bars. The main piece of evidence being a 19-page handwritten plan for how he wanted the murders to be carried out. Story 7. The Friday Night Bank Robber was the most prolific bank robber in U.S. history. I believe he had a master's degree in something analytical like maths. It was a martial arts instructor. He figured out there's a time of the year in the Northeast where it would be dark out just before the banks closed. He used motorcycles to drive through the woods to these banks and rode it back through the woods to a U-Haul truck he had waiting and would put the bike into the truck and drive away calmly. Furthermore, he did this for a long time, kind of like the robbers in the movie Point Break. He would stop for the rest of the year, which had the police really guessing. They couldn't figure out patterns for a long time. Years later, the police started to catch on with his idea of doing it on Friday nights in the Northeast, and from video knew he was probably into martial arts. But that doesn't exactly narrow it down. Dumb luck, some random kids stumbled upon his buried cache of things like a gun, gloves, mask, cash, etc. in the woods. They turned it over to the cops, and that's how they ended up finding out who he was. The FBI gave him some deal where he worked with them and banks on telling them how to prevent bank robberies. Story 8. Joseph James DeAngelo. otherwise known as the Golden State Killer, the East Area Rapist, and the Visalia Ransacker. The guy was a one-man crime wave. In a 12-year period, he committed at least 13 murders, 51 rapes, and 120 burglaries. As the East Area Rapist, he would often select his targets months in advance, conduct extensive reconnaissance, learning the routines of the occupants, and sometimes break in advance of his attack to plant his weapons and ligatures. And he would make threatening/hang-up calls in advance to create a sense of fear. I won't go into details about his attacks, but he had a whole routine and everything that he would go through. And even though the sketches of him were near enough accurate, and the criminal profile of him was dead-on accurate. For example, they correctly identified the attacker as working or having worked in law enforcement and the military, and JJD was a police officer at the time of his crime spree. They never even came close to finding him. When he was arrested, it was the first time he had ever come to the attention of the police. He didn't even have any DNA on file for them to match when that became a thing. That was how good he was at staying off the radar. The reason he got caught? Genealogical testing. You know, those test kits that people get from services such as 23andMe and Ancestry. Well, the police ran the DNA samples through a database used by those services and identified his relatives. They eventually found someone closely related enough to him that they could identify him. So he hadn't even submitted his DNA for testing. One of his relatives did. The guy must have been so fucking shocked when the police showed up at his door. Story 9. The real answer is that there are many perfect crimes, in the sense that no one is ever arrested for having committed them. In 1969, Ted Conrad walked out of a bank in Cleveland with $215K in cash, equivalent to $7 million in 2021, and was never caught. He lived his life as a free person in Boston before confessing to his family just before he died. Story 10. Thread is very Anglo-European-centric. I bring a criminal case from my country. In the year 2006, a group of armed robbers entered the succursal of the Banco Rio in the city of Acasuso, Buenos Aires. 2 of them entered through the doors, 2 others via the underground parking lot, in a car which they supposedly planned to use as a getaway vehicle. Upon entering, they subdued the guards, the employees and the clients looking to perform their duties at the bank. In total, they had around 20 hostages with them, and everything seemed to indicate that the hostage situation wasn't something planned by the robbers, who were surprised by the quick response by the police. Throughout the course of the afternoon, the robbers kept releasing some hostages and doing negotiations with the police on the belief that attempting to escape was futile and that a negotiation at least could earn them some less time in jail. But then, something odd happened. At around 7 p.m., almost 7 hours after the robbery began, one of the hostages used his cell phone to call one of his relatives and tell them that they didn't hear any sound coming from where the robbers were supposedly located. The robbers, not wanting to cause a panic and looking to earn some sympathy from their hostages, for when they were going to be inevitably caught, had let the hostages keep their belongings, and didn't tie them up either. They even sang a happy birthday for one of the customers. This call prompted the police to enter the bank, only to be surprised by what they found inside. The robbers were nowhere to be found. The only thing they left behind, a note saying, "En barrio de ricachones, sin armas ni rencores, es solo plata y no amores." Roughly translated, in town of fat cats, without weapons nor grudges, it's just money, not love. Throughout the course of the hostage negotiations, the robbers were emptying the safe deposit boxes found in the bank vault. A total of 146 boxes were empty, with a sum in value of around $18 million. This money was nowhere to be found, along with the robbers, who soon was discovered had previously dug a tunnel leading into the vault and used it as an escape method. Everything about the robbery was planned. The negotiator had taken classes of theater and oratory to better communicate and play his role with the police. The tunnel, which connected to an underground drain, had inflatable boats waiting for them, and one of the members had even built a makeshift dam to ensure there was enough water for the boats. The weapons which they used weren't even real. They used replicas to save them from harsher sentences were they to get caught. Even the town was considered Acasuso forms part of the affluent Partido district of San Isidro, and the robbers apparently speculated that a robbery on such a location wouldn't cause as much problems for the victims, while they waited for the bank insurance to pay them back. For a month, there were almost no notable leads, that is, until one of the robber's wife came forth with a confession to the police that her husband was involved in the robbery. Her husband, so it seems, was cheating on her and did a poor job explaining where did the money come from, so she confessed to the police in revenge. It was this what eventually got them arrested. Even so, most of the money was never found. The robbers, given the treatment given to the hostages, the professional way in which they conducted themselves, and due to the fact that the main victim of this was a bank, which, following the events of the Argentinian economic crisis of 2001, didn't have any sympathy among the public, were treated as folk heroes of sorts, to the point a movie about them was made years ago. I recommend watching the phenomenal video by Argentinian YouTuber Damien Cook. He does a way better job of narrating the events and gives a lot more detail in the planning and the context in which the robbery took place. TLDR. Robbers rob a bank without spilling a drop of blood in a money heist like robbery. Get done by a disgruntled lover. I would like to add one more comment. I think there are endless crimes that never came to light because they were done so well. But I find cases involving money, bank robberies, gold theft particularly exciting. Everything that has to do with a lot of money. If you want to see something about it, write it in the comments. Alright, that's it. Thank you guys for watching and subscribe for more. We will see us again tomorrow. Until then, have a lovely day, night, or whatever you currently have. Don't forget to leave a comment and share your thoughts. Love y'all.